Good evening. You're with us tonight on The Urban Debate. I'm Seher Zama. Now, we have often, several times discussed stress and addiction that is related to difficulties that adults have faced in this pandemic regarding work from home. But there is an equally important aspect of school from home stress connected to our children. And that stress is leading to an increase in a form of a certain kind of addiction. It refers to a continuous online engagement, and because of that, there is a considerable amount of increase that we are seeing in screen time that has led to a rise in gaming addiction. Gaming addiction there was earlier as well before the pandemic, but during the pandemic there has been a huge rise. And this addiction is now today concerning parents. Certain parents know how to deal with it. They know what to do, how to go about it, but certain other parents are at a complete loss. They're dealing with their own stress of the pandemic, and this is an added stress that their children are facing as well. Now, these are some very important findings that have come in from NIMHANS, saying that it receives 10 to 12 cases per week, and this is specifically pertaining to just online gaming addiction. NIMHANS has also pointed out here that these cases were earlier received just on a basis on a matter of 6 to 7 per week, but now that has considerably gone up. It is a 40% rise in online gaming addiction that they're noticing. And within those online games, interestingly, PUBG has made a comeback. Now, it's important to note here that PUBG, as a violent form of online gaming, was banned by the government of India, but children and youngsters have managed to find proxy servers to get back to it. So tonight we're going to be looking at the larger picture here in helping parents and children both fight this together. But before we move on with our panel of experts, let's also set the ground in better understanding in recognizing what exactly is a gaming disorder. How do you define and recognize a gaming disorder if a child in your family is suffering from it? It means that there is an impaired control over gaming. Gaming overrides everything else. Gaming is the most important thing to do on the list for a child. There is a rising priority that is given to gaming. There is an escalation in gaming despite the red flags. Red flags could be with respect to not wanting to do anything else, with respect to anger and aggression that is being seen in a child's behavior. And gaming, as I said earlier as well, precedes everything else. It precedes every other daily activity. This daily activity could be not just attending school, but other daily activities such as play or eating food. Everything else seems like an interruption to gaming, to that all importance that is given to gaming. Let's throw this open to our panelists here with us. We have Kiran Tevtia, who's a child behavioral psychologist. She's going to be talking to us about cases that she herself has been receiving here in the wake here of this pandemic. We also have Ms. Kajal Roy, who's a concerned parent who wants to do more in fighting this addiction that one sees in their children, and Dr. Pawan Duggal, cyber law expert here. This is, of course, as far as regulating online gaming and particularly those games that have already been banned. Let's first go across to the parent with us here. Ms. Kajal Roy, good evening to all of you, and especially to you. Thanks for being with us here, because this is also with respect to discussing a personal aspect to what the pandemic has thrown at us as parents. Were you aware of the negative impact that this could have, and how did you go about fighting this and helping your child?
Yes, initially to start with, gaming was just limited to a few hours. You know, I'm talking about before lockdown or before pandemic. The children are used to gaming, and they used certain amount of recreation or the time just for their part of it. But since the lockdown and since the children are actually locked at home, and the digital time, as quoted by the NIMHANS, has been increased tremendously, be it study from home or whatever, they have limited the times even for the classes. I'm a teacher. I mean, I've been dealing with the teenagers as well. So we have limited time for the academics. Now, to catch all of the children throughout the day, to take their attention, there has been rapid increase in the gaming. We have seen the teenagers spend around 14 to 15 hours of the day only into gaming, and they're not even moving their eyes, or they're not even leaving. They even get a prompt that the digital hours has been increased. You can switch off, but they have been addicted. It's leading to an addiction wherein they want to reach higher level. They want to win the game. They cannot take the part that they have lost it, and they are just getting into one after the other issues related to it when it comes to gaming. Parents have raised a lot of concerns, and they really don't know how to get out of this and how to deal with the teenagers. Teenagers are not the one who are going to listen. They're pretty rebellious at that age group, and we have already locked them inside. There is no option of going out and playing or meeting their peers. And when they're discussing with their peer group, also it's the game, which level they're playing the duo. So they call the best friends. In PUBG, there is a squad wherein 4 of them get together and play it. And then they will be, specifically PUBG, there are very good games as well. There are some creative games. There are some games which lead to, village building, creativity and all. But when we are talking about the coming back of the PUBG, it's
Right.
a surveillance. It's dealing with your violence. It's dealing with killing and the blood and the weapons. It's somehow creates a kind of mental. The child is 14 hours doing only that, which creates quite
Absolutely.
of mental disturbance in a child. And they are only teenagers. This is not about the 20, 30 or those who are into
Right.
graduations or anything. These are the young minds which have got into it, and the parents are struggling to find out the options. What could be the way out of it? How can you deal with it? What is the best option?
Indeed.
If it is not digital media, what next? How do I engage my child? And when they're talking about with the peer group, also it's the same
Absolutely.
thing.
This is a struggle because one can't entirely go away from screen time, because online schools is a very important part of screen time here. Gets difficult to monitor what's exactly happening on screen, whether it's attendance of school or whether a child has silently slipped into gaming even during school hours here. Kiran Tevtia, my next question here to you, and while I ask you this, I'm also going to play out here on our screen causes of gaming addiction, which were very different what we had before the pandemic. It was about peer pressure. It could be about pressure from academic pressure here, from parents here as well, loneliness, poor academic performance. But these were all reasons that have now been pushed down the list. Top of the list is the pandemic-related stress, and this is something, the pandemic is not going away anytime soon. We would be switching back to offline, online classes, engagements that would continue online in larger stretches here. This is here to stay. So, what really are the methods to fight this, in your view?
Hi. So to begin with, first we have to understand that how do we decouple a few assumptions here, okay? I get so many cases where first we try to put it that, all right, it is because of the online education that we also have to open up the entertainment, the use of screen for entertainment as well for the child. Now we must decouple these two. Okay, there are few things where we don't have an option, but there are few things where we definitely have an option, and where a kind of structure and expectations can be put on the child. So my request is, yes, as what Kajal was also sharing, that the more the gaming addiction is, the more the loneliness of the child is increasing, more the aggression of the child is increasing. So it is very important. Hello, am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah, so it is very important that we as a parent are also setting an expectation to the child in terms of what are the self-care that you expect the child to do. Similar to how you would expect the child when the child would be going to physical education. What is the expectation that you have in terms of helping the overall family be it whether it is ordering something for the grocery, whether it is some kind of chore which is related to the child itself, whether it is in terms of socializing, what are the modes of socializing, whether it is that you're doing some kind of video call with each other, whether you are having some calls, we are playing some games with each other, but then some kind of timeline, the way it was happening in the physical education, what was happening in physical education was the time was always at stake. If you go out to play some game, you had to be back by a particular time because there were other back-to-back activities. Now, when everything is at home, time has become like has become very fluid, the concept of time. So it is very important that, okay, to have your expectation, what is the sleeping time, what is the eating time, have some few rules for your own self and few rules for the child as well. That if it is an eating time, if it is a sleeping time, if it is, what are the ways to do socializing? It is very important. There's another challenge which I'm seeing that a lot of kids are facing. Gaming, we have to understand, is made on the basis of gambling concept. It is bottomless, and if we expect that the child is going to get a kind of satisfaction at the end of it, it's not going to happen. Rather, the child is going to feel more anxious at the end of it. And with the onslaught of different kind of stereotyping, a particular way of looking, it can definitely have impact on the child's psyche, where the child is going to feel, am I not good enough? It opens the door for some kind of cyberbullying. This is a stage where they are building their own individual self-identity. So if at this time we are opening up such kind of options to the child on for a long hours, and we are not building other areas, this is a lot of disservice to the child. So we got to be sensitive about it. Please open up other areas for the child to engage.
Absolutely.
And it has to be with the physical world as well. In fact, I get a case where the child is started using money either by cash or taking cash from home to buy the diamonds. So we have to understand what is this industry, what is the impact this industry putting on the child. So that's very important as a parent to keep the interaction going with the child.
All right. So it's also an alt reality which is created for the child's mind, and that parents need to be aware of here as well. Let me get in Dr. Pawan Duggal here on this. Dr. Duggal, we often, of course, as a cyber law expert, talk to you about cyber crime, cyber laws. But this is also pertaining to services that should be available. I mean, we're aware of Net Nanny. When the internet boom happened, there was Net Nanny. Is there an available Net Nanny for gaming platforms as well? And this is specifically concerning a very violent aspect to this addiction, which has been reported in Nimhan's findings here, that is pertaining to PUBG. Now, PUBG is something that was entirely banned by the government of India, but people and children have managed to find proxy servers to continue having access to this violent game and playing it. So is there a Net Nanny on gaming platforms which is available that parents should be using?
Currently, at the time when we talk, there's no concept of a Net Nanny for the online gaming ecosystem. The reason for this is this particular ecosystem has exploded. And in India, the pandemic has also seen the beginning of the golden age of cybercrime. And to a large extent, some elements of contribution of this golden age of cybercrime is being done by children who are engaged on a 24/7 basis in this gaming ecosystem, who lose the distinction between what's the real world and what's the virtual world. And more significantly, we find that while some apps are banned for a variety of purposes in India, we also find a new trend where these banned apps come up with new manifestations, new avatars, and come back again in India. For example, PUBG was banned, but now, lo and behold, they've come up under the new garb of a battlefield or a battle force, and it's the same thing, just the same ecosystem is there, but with some minor changes, and they're back in India again. Now, at the time when India is seeing a policy vacuum in terms of this gaming ecosystem and its regulation, it is very, very difficult to find out legal basis of how we can regulate this. In case if you're going to put all our eggs into one basket, which is the Indian Information Technology Act 2000, we may be disappointed because this is an Indian cyber law. It was never really meant for the gaming ecosystem. On top of it, the government till today has not yet come up with dedicated gaming ecosystem related regulations or even due diligences. Now, all these gaming service providers who provide these various games are ultimately intermediaries under the Information Technology Act. And in February 2021, the government has come up with the Information Technology Rules 2021, which are equally applicable to these gaming platforms. But because nobody is aware of this, because there is no effective enforcement, everybody thinks it's hunky-dory and we can do what we really want to do. But these gaming ecosystems are having an overall negative impact upon not just the growth of the psyche, but also the intelligence of the target students, the target users, but more significantly, are contributing in a very remarkable way in the destruction of the family values in India and the destruction of so-called joint family fabric of the country as a whole. So consequently, the quicker we realize and the government realizes that the kind of damage, and this is irreversible, that these gaming apps are doing on children, and the quicker we start coming up with minimal enabling regulation so as to ensure that we protect the innocent minds from the exposures from gory violence or sex or other related negative consequences, the better it will be ultimately in terms of protecting Indian children, Indian childhood, and more significantly, can make a foundation for the further growth of Indian nation.
Right. And also because you've mentioned now the role of the government on how we need to put in stricter restrictions and guidelines in place, even though they exist in paper, on how monitoring and implementation of this needs to be done. We'll expand on that in the coming few minutes here, Dr. Duggal. But Kiran, I want to get you in this as far as available help, and this is also not just basis private clinics and helplines. There is a very well-known child helpline number, which is 1098 1098. But does that look into the aspect of gaming addiction, or this is far too new? 1098 does take into account other forms of addiction, other forms of abuse in children, but is there a cell of for taking into account concerns being raised for gaming addiction? Is there a number that one can pick up and call?
That's a very, very, very good question. In fact, today itself, I had made a call to 1098 for one of the cases where it was a severe case of a 13-year-old child being physically violent on the parents because the parent wanted the mobile for attending her own classes. And the child wanted to continue playing the game. So unfortunately, when I speak to 1098 as well, they are very good in terms of they are ready to give counseling for 2-3 days, 2-3 times they are ready to come to the places. But if you talk about specifically about gaming addiction, this is not something, it's a new thing which has come up for the last 1.5 years in such a big numbers. And you know, there is another tricky thing, even when in January and February, when we were noticing that, yes, the lockdown was going down a bit, there were so many children in this age who were saying, I don't want to go outdoors. I don't want to meet people. Mujhe maza nahi aa raha hai. So we got to understand that, yes, we are not having any dedicated line at this time, but the changes which this is making is going to be very difficult to reverse later. So we got to be cognizant about it, dear.
Right. Kajal, I want to ask you this question here with respect to how aware a parent should be, and this is, I'm asking you this also with a personal experience on how I as a parent would deal with this at home. It gets exhausting to a point to keep up with what your child is doing online. What are the games that your child is engaging with? How much time to continuously keep up with the schedule, to continuously keep up with the nature of engagement, and be as aware of what game is being played and to what extent it is open to online chats, a child engaging with the outside world, whether or not that's violent, that can be abusive in nature as well. How exhausting is the whole process for you as a parent?
To be very frank with you, a teenager, a child who is into young adults, or it's very difficult. They don't want to share. They don't want to tell that I am playing this game or I am having a discussion with certain people. They want their privacy. That's the prime rule. I mean, they don't like anybody to interfere into their games or to find out what exactly are they playing, how many hours they are playing. We do come to know that how many hours, digital hours, they are on the mobile, and they don't want their mobiles to be touched. It's their property. Even if you try to touch it, they are rebellious. As Kiran was telling, that they got the physical kind of things. We don't want rifts now at home. We stay in a joint family. We don't want the parents to be, everybody is engaged in their work, and somehow as a parent, we feel that the child is getting totally cut off into a virtual world. They don't realize at this age that that's not real, that the game which they're playing, the addiction they're getting into, it's actually a virtual life they're leading to. And we as a parent are helpless. We don't know how to pull them through. Lunchtime or dinner time, you're not supposed to touch your mobile. They will listen to that 10 minutes, 15 minutes. That's it. The moment that 10 minutes is over, they want their handset back. They want, you cannot set a rule that, they do turn up and reply back. So what do we do with it? I mean, I would open a question to the panel and the experts here, psychologists, and that how do you deal? If you're giving an option, what option can I give to my child? What option can I give it to my students? That, okay, you don't go to the digital side.
All right, Kiran, would you like to answer that? What are the available easy options for parents to use at home, if not wanting necessarily to go to a clinic here for stress busting sessions? What can be easily done at home?
Right. See, first thing there is that we have to understand two assumptions that we are making here. First assumption that we are making here is about privacy that we just talked about. Now, the tricky thing when the parent starts thinking that it is a private thing that the child is doing on a public platform, right? Somewhere we have to draw a line on that assumption. If a child is inside and there's a friend and the child is talking to that friend in a physical mode, it's private. If the child goes down out, whatever the child is talking to somebody, it's private. If the child just wants to be in his or her room, wants to do some activity, it is private. But the moment the child is connected to internet-enabled device, it is very important for the parent to say that, you know what, dear, whenever I need to keep coming in whenever and you got to be comfortable with that. However, the point being, it's good if as a parent, you sit with the child and you join and you see what exactly the child is doing. You see what all chatting systems are out there. You have to increase your knowledge of the game that the child is doing. That is first thing. First thing is whatever your child doing, you have to be confident that you can always go in and of course, because they are teenagers and they have a strong sense of privacy. In fact, I have a 6-year-old child who comes and tells the parent that, okay, I need my privacy. So this word is very strongly, as much as used inappropriately, it is misused as well. So as a parent, you have to give more data to the child. You should talk to the child. The moment you start saying, oh my God, my child is asking me or is back answering me, stop treating it as a personal, hurt on yourself and start talking to the child in a very calm manner. And of course, like what Kajal was also sharing, and Kajal will tell you that for an older child, we cannot and we should not snatch the devices from their hand. You can definitely use things like if the rules of the house are not really followed, you can put restrictions like, dear, it looks like, this is becoming more and more weakness for us. So you know what, next 3 days, we are going to have a device free time and I'm going to disconnect the internet. So you can put some kind of such, are you okay with that? No, I'm not okay. Give me some options here. Right? So
to continue having an open dialogue process, this sounds very official, but if a child is snapping back at the age of 6 and saying that the child needs his or her privacy, yes, there have to be some stricter measures that parents would need to take, stricter but perhaps more easily facilitated here. Pawan, you were talking about government guidelines. Now, what the Nimhan's report has indicated, a 40% rise in online gaming addiction is a huge spike. And as I said earlier, because this is pandemic driven, this is perhaps here to stay for longer. A post-COVID change, a paradigm shift in lifestyle is something that is to stay here for longer. And you mentioned government guidelines that are available and announced already, but implementation of more that needs to be done. What is it that you think that government could step in and do more?
The government has only come up with broad, generic guidelines for all intermediaries and network service providers, which would also include the gaming service providers. So these are normal due diligences like ensuring that they deal properly with the data of their users, that they have in place reasonable security practices, procedures, and they ensure the privacy of the users. But I think I want the government to go a next step forward. They need to come up with specific guidelines only for game developers, game app service providers, and the gaming app ecosystem. Why? Because that's an unregulated space. Today, I want to develop any game, I can develop a game. Yes, somebody will have an objection to blood being shown as red, so I will show blood as green. Does that fundamentally change things? It does not. On the contrary, there are no restrictions of any kind whatsoever in terms of what is the minimum kind of basic standards that these gaming developers and the gaming service providers need to follow. I think that needs to be stipulated by the government under Section 79 of the Information Technology Act 2000. Number two, these gaming developers and the gaming platforms need to be reminded under Rule 7 of the IT Rules 2021 that if you are not going to fulfill these guidelines, which should be made mandatory, then there will be criminal liability waiting for you, which will be of imprisonment for offences under the IT Act and the Indian Penal Code. Further, the statutory exemption from legal liability that the law is providing you, which is being extensively misused in the context of the gaming ecosystem, needs to be snatched away from them by operation of law, again, by Rule 7.
But Pawan, very quickly, before we wrap this up here, there are yes, very quickly before we wrap this up here, there are age-specific games here. It's usually 16 plus, 18 plus, 7 plus, 8 plus. They're specified here on the gaming platform. But there's no checking on a 6-year-old accepting an 18 plus age of game.
And that's the huge problem, because in India, whether it's a child, whether it's an adult, we are also enamored by the Indian Jugaad school of management. We love to do Jugaad in terms of manipulating our times, our ages, when we go on these platforms. So somewhere down the line, parental control will have to be encouraged. Somewhere down the line, children will have to be told about the legal consequences, which is going to befall. I recently saw a case where internet connection was misused at home by a 6-year-old, and the police landed up and picked up the father because the internet connection was in the name of the father. Now, children need to be told through case studies that, look, there needs to be certain sanity in what you're doing. Gaming is wonderful, it's welcome, but please don't invite unpleasant or unintended consequences for you or your family.
Absolutely,
also keep in mind,
to keep it on a balance here, and there's a lot for parents to keep a check at home. I'm afraid we'll entirely have to leave it at that. We've run out of time, but appreciate all the experts who've spoken to us here on this. And hopefully a lot of parents watching us tonight have managed to find home some answers that could help them in what their children are suffering through. We've given you the warning signs here and some working mechanisms that can work at home as well. Thanks for being with us tonight.